Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm wearing a face mask, and I'm not doing it because I'm afraid of COVID-19. I'll tell you that right now. I'm wearing this cool mask because my wife made it. And actually, Sheila and her sister Wendy started out making masks to help a local hospital out that they were needing masks. So they got busy and started making them. But actually, it's really helped me quite a bit as I've been working out in the yard. This is the time of the year that I really have a lot of sinus problems, allergies, and whatnot. And God forbid now, if you sneeze in a public place, people go like bat crap crazy, insane, like terrified. You just spread the virus or something. And nowadays, a lot of different places, the local authorities are making you actually have to wear a mask out in public. So my wife and her sister and our niece and my son even has been helping out. They started making a bunch of masks. In fact, those of you who attended the Dallas conference last year, she made a bunch of like totes and bags and stuff like that. People really liked them, so she started doing a whole bunch of sewing. In fact, I'm going to put up a website you can check out. She's doing it under the brand Simply Skiba. So you can go to simplyskiba.com. Check out her website. She's still updating it and adding more products to it, but she's got the masks up there now. Of course, we're not allowed to say that they protect you from anything. We're not medical professionals. There are no guarantees this will protect you from any kind of virus or anything like that. In fact, the FDA would probably come after us if we made any other claim other than that these are fashion designer masks. So that's what we're calling them. So we'll go with that. But she's got designs for men and women. You can kind of click through, check them out, different ones. And yeah, my son's a Trump supporter, so they even have a Trump MAGA mask that he designed. Actually, he created that diagram right there. Hey, they need masks too, right? So you can check those out. She has different sizes and stuff for men and for women. I'm wearing the male one, obviously. The smaller ones are for women. She's got one like this, and the smaller ones, they have like these little stretchy hoops things, and they're made really, they fit her head, but some people might have a bigger head or a bigger face. And the way she made them, you can actually cut the string if you need to and pull it out and put something else in there if you want to. And like the one I'm wearing right now, we put a shoelace through it. And I don't know if you can see this, but I didn't bother cutting the length of the shoelace because I thought, wow, of course I'm getting all tangled up in my mask here. I mean, my microphone, but the extra shoelace becomes a good hanger for my glasses. So I'm at the age now where are my glasses? They're on your head, stupid. So these are hanging down with the extra, and I got a little one of those little clips that you can kind of like push the button and pull it and tighten it, so it fits nice and tight and real good. So yeah, if you guys happen to need, if you're afraid of the COVID-19 virus, or if you have allergies like I do, or if your local authorities are making you wear masks in public, well, we've got a whole bunch of them there for you to check out. She'll be adding more as they go along. And of course, all this stuff helps our ministry and the things that we're trying to do. So yeah, my wife, her sister, our niece, and my son have been very busy doing all that kind of stuff. And I've been out working in the yard and stuff like that and trying to get back on seed, keeping busy. What have you been up to these days, Zen?
Just working on a new book on the pre-Adamites, and so that's what I've been focused on, and then just doing radio broadcasts on the newest one, which I believe I sent it to you, so it should be coming along with the new calendar and some other. I think I sent you the Word of the Lord to my son's newest book on the how it was stripped out, the Word of the Lord from the Pentateuch. So all that should be coming to you very soon.
Yeah, no, I actually got I think it was either today or yesterday, got a whole package full of more Zen goodies. Got a bunch of books and your new calendar. So yeah, appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. And yeah, so just promoting that and making people aware of that whole story, because it's a fascinating tale. The whole thing of the rod of wonder, and then the garments of power, and how it led to even like the rise of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel and things of that nature, Joseph, and even Moshe and the parting of the Red Sea, the war against the giants. Really fascinating story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into all this stuff. And I was like, oh man, this looks cool. This looks cool. This is cool. So yeah, let me see here. I forgot to set up the browser for. You remember where we left off?
70. We did one chapter 72 that was on the motions, the movements of the sun.
Yeah, we
And
just got started on that, right? So it was 72 in the Charles and 71 in the Lawrence.
yeah, I think we made it pretty much through that whole chapter because we explained all the motions and the movements and how the sun going through the six gates creates the seasons. And so I
Yeah,
think we're on the next chapter.
in fact, let me pull that up on my YouTube channel because we were kind of rushed, if memory serves, in the last half-hour segment, and you were going through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can just do a recap on
Yeah,
that.
sure.
And if you had, do you have that graphic that you had with the loops,
Yes.
the gates and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
let me put
yeah, I can screen share your Skype if you do that.
We also created like a short, well, I think you did, and then I reposted it after you did on the movement of the sun, where we connected it to your stellarium, and then we also talked about in a previous show how the Book of Ecclesiastes in the Targum version describes the same motion of the sun through these gates, but according to what Enoch describes it. But Solomon describes it in the same way that Enoch does. So I'll find that video and post a link to it as well.
Okay. Because I did see some comments last week. People were like, I'm going to have to listen to this a few more times to get it.
Yeah, well, actually, that video will show and explain it in greater detail as
Okay.
this as well.
So,
But yeah, here's
oh, you got it.
the image of the six gates. And just to explain it really quickly, the way that Enoch has the gates divided, it's one is right above the Tropic of Capricorn, which you see the orange circle, that's the Tropic of Capricorn, the very outer circle. Then the second gate is in between the equator and the Tropic of Capricorn. The third gate touches the equator, and then the fourth gate is right above the equator, moving towards the Tropic of Cancer. The fifth gate is in between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer, and then the sixth gate touches the Tropic of Cancer. And then anytime you get to either the equator for the vernal equinox or the autumnal equinox, or the Tropic of Cancer for the summer solstice, or the Tropic of Capricorn for the winter solstice, Enoch describes the motions of through that gate as 31 days, because it takes it one day to either cross the equator or reaching the tropics to reverse course and move the other direction. But in that particular chapter that we went over, Enoch begins the description of his motions on the equator between the third and the fourth gates of heaven. And then he describes how it moves 91 days to the Tropic of Cancer, which is this yellow circle in the very inner part of this azimuthal equidistant projection map. And then it reverses course. This, of course, is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, and the day is twice as long as the night. Then it reverses course, moves 91 days back towards the equator for the autumnal equinox, and then it moves into southern latitudes, and then the sun is on the outer circle, moving 91 days from the equator to the Tropic of Capricorn, or the winter solstice, when that's the shortest day of the year and night is twice as long, according to the way that Enoch breaks it down again. He describes each day in 18 portions, which is 1.333 hours of daylight or sunlight. And then it takes 91 days for the sun to move back towards the center and then reaching the equator for the vernal equinox that begins a new year. And so the new year does begin on the vernal equinox. As far as the summer, the solar calendar, which is 364 days long. And then in the next portion, when he goes into the lesser luminary, Enoch gives us a 354-day lunar calendar and explains that. And then he tells us that, the moon is what sets the beginnings of the months, and so we see how this calendar it unfolds, and then he describes at the very end of these two calendar systems how they intercalate, which is how they come together to form what I believe is the Enochian lunar solar calendar. Then he also adds on top of that the motions of the planets and then the motions of the constellations, which is a 25,000, what's called the Great Year. And then that is the heavenly calendar. So it's the moon, the sun, the planets, and the constellations that make up what is the heavenly clockwork system.
Very good. And you have, hang on a second. You've explained this all in tremendous detail in your
in my book.
Enoch as keys to or Flat Earth as keys to decrypting. Decrypting the Book of Enoch. I still got that up on the screen here. Let me see if I can find the chapters here. 72, I think, in Charles. Right? That's where I left off. 73 for you.
73 for me.
Yeah. Okay. Stand by. Trying to do way too many things here at once.
Right.
All right. So that was Courses of Heavenly Luminaries, chapter 72 and 73. Here we go. And whoops, let me move that out of the way. And after this law, I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon. And her circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind. And light is given to her in definite measure. And her rising and setting change every month, and her days are like the days of the sun. And when her light is uniform, i.e. full, it amounts to the 7th part of the light of the sun. And thus she rises. And her first phase in the east comes forth in the 30th morning, and on that day she becomes visible and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th day after, or together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. And one half of her goes forth by a 7th part, and her whole circumference is empty, without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it. And the 14th part of her is light. And when she receives 1/7 part of the half of her light amounts to 1/7 part and the half thereof. And she sets with the sun, and when the sun rises, the moon rises with him, and receives the half of 1 part of light. And in that night, in the beginning of her morning, in the commencement of the lunar day, the moon sets with the sun and is invisible that night with the 14 parts and the half of 1 of them. And she rises on that day with exactly a 7th part and comes forth and recedes from the rising of the sun. And in her remaining days, she becomes bright in the remaining 13 parts.
Okay.
I'm going to put my graphic back up on the screen while you're talking.
Yep, and I did find that video, so after I read this, I'll post it for people.
Okay.
And after this law, I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon. and her circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind, and light is given to her in definite measure. And her rising and setting change every month, and her days are like the days of the sun. And when her light is uniform, full, it amounts to the seventh part of the light of the sun. And thus she rises. And her first phase in the east comes forth on the 30th morning, and on that day she becomes visible and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th day together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. And the one half of her goes forth by a seventh part, and her whole circumference is empty, without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, and the 14th part of her light. And when she receives 1/7 part of the half of her light amounts to 1/7 part and the half thereof. And she sets with the sun, and when the sun rises, the moon rises with him, and receives the half of one part of light. And in that night, in the beginning of her morning, in the commencement of the lunar day, the moon sets with the sun, and is invisible that night with the 14 parts and the half of one of them. And she rises on that day with exactly a seventh part, and comes forth and recedes from the rising of the sun, and in her remaining days she becomes bright in the remaining 13 parts.
I think I was looking at the wrong chapter while you were reading. Let me see. Oh, yeah, okay. I was looking at the next chapter. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on what's going on with the moon here?
Well, Enoch is describing how the moon changes phases, and how it goes from being completely void of light, which that's the 30th day, what is called translation day. And then the beginning of the month, which I think he covers in the next part, is when, as he describes it here at the very end, because the moon is invisible, completely void of light, when it is moving in lunar conjunction with the sun, which means it rises, crosses the sky, and then sets with the sun. And then the very next day, because it lags about 50 minutes behind the sun every day, it will become full with this 1/7 portion of light. And that's how the moon moves through its phases, is by 1/7 portion. So each night, once it becomes a waxing crescent, which is he'll tell us the very beginning of the month, that is the first day on the lunar calendar. And then it takes it 15 days to become full, which is why, the 15th on the lunar calendar is equated with the full moon. And then the full moon occurs, but then it begins to wane on that same day. And so then it takes it either 14 days or 15 days, depending on if it's a 29-day lunar month or a 30-day lunar month, which it alternates. And then every once in a while you have back-to-back 30-day lunar months. Because of the average synodic month, it takes it 29.541 days to change its average phases, to go through all four phases. And so the different phases are aligned to the seventh portion, and that's why it takes 7 days to go to first quarter, and then another 7 to go to full, and another 7 to go to third quarter, and then another 7 or 8, depending on the translation day, to lunar conjunctive, and then back to where it becomes visible again. And so he's telling us exactly how the moon gains her light by 1/7 portion, and then moves from becoming completely void of light to becoming full, which is the full moon, and then disappearing all the way to becoming void of light again.
So on the screen, I'm showing people that are watching on YouTube, I've got a video that I did May 25th, 2015, how the moon could be self-lighting. And I just created a ball that had half white and half black on it and rotated the ball. And then put the surface of the moon on top of it. So you see it
very cool
from on the inside. It's lighting from the inside. And it was interesting because, the scriptures say that the moon gives her light.
Right.
Enoch talks about receiving it, but also talks about giving it. And
right.
So the question is the moon a reflector? Is it a reflective rock? Or is it somehow getting energy or something from the sun and then giving it? And I think we talked about it last week or one of the shows we did sometime recently, that Bob and Cami Nodell, she's trained like a gemologist, with stones and whatnot. And I think it's called Celestine or Celestite, something. I think it's Celestine, something like that. Is a specific type of rock that it's like the glow in the dark watches we used to get. When you open up the cereal box, you get the prize, right? You get the little spy watch or whatever, and you hold it up to the light for a while, and then you turn the lights off, and it gives its own light. So in the sense, it's receiving the energy or photons or whatever, and then it's giving it.
Right.
And she also said that particular type of rock, when it gets wet, it pits into craters, which is really interesting to me because, if you look at and I've spent a lot of time, especially as a kid, I had a 300 power telescope and spent a lot of time out in my parents' front yard looking at the moon and pretty much everything else out there that I could train the telescope in the sky, to look at. And all the craters, apparently, if you believe that the craters are there from meteors, every single meteor hit the moon at a 90-degree angle.
Right.
Really? Like, it makes no sense. It makes more sense to me that they are either volcanic craters, like we might see like in some place such as Hawaii. If you look at the aerial view of Hawaii and you see some of the craters that are there, those are from volcanoes.
Right.
Or that they could be, if the moon is made of that particular type of rock, that it would pit with water. And why that's significant to me is, the windows of heaven opened above it, and the water came down and filled the enclosure that is the dome enclosed world of the Book of Enoch and the Bible as well, and the fountains of the great deep shot up first. So, it's theoretically possible then that the moon was hit by that water. And if it is that type of rock, that would explain the pitting. Anyway, I find it really interesting. And while I was contemplating these things and I was reading books like Zetetic Astronomy and Terra Firma, I was in the pool at my apartment complex, and it was one of those days when the sun and moon are up at the same time. And it was like a half moon. And, I'm an artist. I know about, perspective and, things like that, right? And like if anybody, this is not rocket science. Like if you've got a ball, like form your fist into a ball in your left hand and pretend your right hand is the light source. Wherever you put your light source, the terminator line is going to be directly parallel to that light source, right? But the problem was the terminator line of the shadow on the moon was off by close to 40 degrees. Like I could see the sun and I could see the moon, and the shadow on the moon was not reflecting the angle that it should be if it was actually reflecting light from the sun. And that's when I first started questioning, like, what is happening here? And I started looking up, what is the scientific explanation for that? And man, if you look into that really seemed like a massive tap dance routine. Listen to people try to explain that. So
yeah, absolutely.
So let me see how much time we have left. We got about a minute before we're going to break, I guess. So, maybe when we come back from the break, you can give your thoughts as to, how is the moon giving her light?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what is Enoch talking about when it says that it takes a part of the light from the sun, like the sun's like giving it? And have you looked into the Thunderbolts project at all?
No, I have not, but you did mention that, and I really need to. I just have not yet. I keep forgetting to do that after we mention it.
Well, it's not like you don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, you should definitely check into it. And anybody listening to this broadcast right now, they could go on YouTube and look up Thunderbolts Project. Now, these people don't believe they believe the Earth's a globe, but they don't believe the standard model of cosmology. They believe in the electrical universe.
Right.
So, it's all about electromagnetism and plasma and things of that nature, as opposed to the Newton-Einstein gravity model. All right, we'll talk some more.
All right.
The break.
Everyday questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity, but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
We're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and right before the break, we were talking about the phases of the moon and how all that works, at least according to the Book of Enoch. There's another video that you might want to check out as far as the moon goes. On my website, there was, on my YouTube channel, published January 19, 2016. It was called Many Moon Questions, about 13 minutes long. And it includes video that I shot of the moon in when the sun's shining, where the terminator line where it should be, and then showing that it's between 30 and 40 degrees off. And I think this video also talked about the one of the blood moon lunar eclipses that was real big around that time. I was on the roof of my parking garage at the office that I was officing out of at that time, and the sun had gone down behind me in the west, and the moon was popping up in the east. And the moon popped up, I want to say it's like 20 minutes after the sun went down, and like 20 minutes later it was going into a full blood red moon lunar eclipse. And now, if you can envision this, like imagine your head is the Earth, because in the standard model, the eclipse occurs when the sun and the Earth and the moon are all in a perfect line. And, the sun's shining on the Earth, and you got the umbra and the penumbra shadow of the Earth, and that casts a shadow supposedly on the moon, creating the lunar eclipse. Well, okay, so if you imagine your head as the moon, or as the Earth, and if the sun goes down directly behind you, and the sun is the light source, what direction should the shadow of your head be on the orb that is the moon in front of you? It should be coming up from below, right? If the sun goes down behind you, as the sun's going down, the way that perspective should work is that the shadow that my head in this case, or the Earth in this case, should be casting on the moon, should be coming from the bottom up. But it didn't. It came from about the 10 o'clock position at the top down. I'm documenting, I'm looking, I'm like, what? Like, and this time, this is January 2016. Yeah, I was still not committing at this time. Mm-hmm. I didn't finally fully commit to that whole cosmology until later that year, after Rick and I got back from the Lake Michigan trip, which was June of 2016. So, it was about 8 months into the research, maybe something like that by this time. And I was calling myself a zetetic agnostic as it pertained to the subject. And like the more I looked around me, the more questions I had. I'm like, okay, the angle's not right. The eclipse isn't happening the way it should. I mean, what is happening? So, again, looking at the Bible, the moon gives her light, and looking at the Book of Enoch, gives added details. So, what's your take on all of that?
I do believe that the moon is a transformer in some way, and that with the account of Enoch describing how the sun does give her light, but we know that she's not reflecting that light, and that the properties of her light are completely different than that of the sun's. And so it has to mean that if she is in fact receiving light from the sun in some manner, that there has to be some transformation going on in order for her to then completely alter and change that light and transform it into new property, and that the moon's rays are cooling, in fact, as you've tested with a temperature gauge. And so that, in my opinion, is what Enoch is describing, that perhaps in some manner, like that, the Celestine, the glow in the dark, that stuff, that receiving the light, it transforms it, transmutates it, and makes it its own in some manner.
Yeah, I'm playing without the audio, I'm just playing the video in the background here. It shows my body casting a shadow, showing where the sun is behind me. And then I'm going to look up into the sky and see the moon, and the terminator line, it's not going to make any sense. So there's the moon with the terminator line kind of at a angle, headed up to like the 10 o'clock position. And then I'm going to show you, okay, like I got it so it's perpendicular. The light source should be right to the right side of the moon, but it's not. It's like way down, because the sun was setting at this point, and the moon's like way up in the sky. The sun's way down to the lower right. So that didn't make any sense. So when I went to the Griffith Observatory in Hollywood, that's in a lot of movies and stuff like that. And when you go in there, the first thing you're confronted with is a Foucault pendulum. And that's like in the center of this dome ceiling where they have all these pagan gods painted on it. So you got it's overt paganism with the Foucault pendulum. And while I got there just as they're starting the tour, and the tour guide, in the process of explaining how the Foucault pendulum supposedly work, she says, but the thing stops. So we have an electromagnetic motor up there that keeps it moving. And she just went on talking, like she didn't even realize what she just said. I'm going, wait a minute, the Foucault pendulum is supposed to be working because the Earth's allegedly rotating. You're telling me that there's an electromagnetic motor up there that's making it do its thing. And then later, Matt Long confirmed it. He actually has installed those electromagnetic motors before, so he confirmed it. He's like, oh yeah, so that whole thing's a smoke and mirror fraud. In fact, if you do research on the Foucault pendulum, you'll see that even in the day when Foucault first did it, there were people contesting it. They're like, what happens with the Foucault pendulum is heavily dependent on, first of all, how you start the thing moving. And so it's a gimbal. So depending on how you launch it, the gimbal is going to do what it does, And he said sometimes the thing went backwards. Sometimes it, went in completely different directions than what it's supposed to do. And apparently, I think it's solar eclipses have some kind of strange effect that screws up Foucault pendulums. Like, what would that have to do with anything?
Right.
Why would if the sun's allegedly 93 million miles away and the moon's, a 250,000 miles away, why would the moon going in front of the sun have any effect whatsoever on a Foucault pendulum if the Foucault pendulum is allegedly there to show how the Earth's rotating? So, like your head starts spinning. You're like, well, how do we even believe any of this stuff, Right. So, but they had some other pretty cool. Oh, actually, the video that's right now is that I'm showing is this older guy. I was doing a Nephilim conference in Lubbock, and he's the guy. He's showing me the thermometer thing that that people use to test like air conditioning or whatever.
Right.
You point it and the laser beam hits whatever, and it tells you what the temperature is. And he was showing how, it's so bizarre that the moon is giving cold light. Like in the bright light of the moon, when he shines it like on the parking lot, it's actually, colder? So in the sunlight, it's warmer in the sunlight and cooler in the shade. It's the exact opposite.
Right.
It's colder in the direct moonlight and warmer in the shade. I'm like, it is between like 10 and 20 degrees sometimes. I'm like, what? So anyway, getting back to Griffith Observatory, they have all these exhibits. And, most of them are pretty good. They're science exhibits explaining how stuff works. And so, they got little miniatures that describe how certain, the physics work and, for different things. And so I go to the exhibit for how the phases of the moon work. Now, we're told that the phases of the moon are caused by the angle at which the moon is going around the Earth and how the sun is hitting it, because they say it's a reflector, right? So you would think that you would have a tidal-locked ball rotating and orbiting at such a speed such that it always has the face towards the Earth, right? Because the moon also rotates like the Earth rotates. It's just, according to that model, it just happens to be in sync so that we always see the same phase of the moon as it's going around us. So you would think that you would have a model of a rotating Earth with a rotating moon that is orbiting in such a way that it's locked so the face is always pointing to the Earth, with a light source being the sun to show how the phases of the moon were.
Right.
Is that what they had? No. They had a self-illuminating ball going around in a circle overhead. I'm going, wow. Like, yeah, I'm like, if these guys can figure out how to do that, I'm going to go out on a limb here and just suggest maybe the creator of the cosmos just might have an idea of how to do the same thing.
Absolutely. And I'm sure they couldn't figure out how to make it work in the other manner. Because it doesn't.
Or at least, because so many other displays that they had were really good, So, obviously they're not stupid people,
Right.
They would have had smart enough people that they could have engineered that as a hands-on display for you to check out. But, if you live out in California, go to the Griffith Observatory and check it out for yourself. Because I'm like, well, maybe they're just telling the truth. It's a self-illuminating orb.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, the way that science, the way that the Earth is spinning, or supposedly the way that they have it spinning, is that it's rotating eastward. Well, that actually, if you watch the way that the moon changes phases, it's completely opposite to what they tell us the motion of the moon is, because they have it going counterclockwise when it actually moves clockwise in the heavens when you're looking down.
When you're looking down from above.
Yeah, when you're looking down from above, but when you're looking up. And so they've got it completely backwards. And anybody that looks at the way that the moon works and the way that it creates its phases, because it will become a waxing crescent in the western skies. And then when it's first quarter moon, it will be in our northern skies. And then when it's full moon, it will be in our western skies and rise when the sun sets. And then afterwards, in third quarter, it will rise 6 hours after, and that's in southern skies. So it's moving, in the opposite direction as what they tell us, that it's moving in synchronous orbit with the Earth, which is spinning eastward.
Yeah, that last big lunar eclipse that we had that was 70 miles across.
Right. Yeah.
Went the opposite. Solar eclipse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Solar eclipse showing the shadow of the moon, in this case, on the Earth, was only 70 miles across. And I'm asking people like, okay, wait a minute. Since when does an object cast a shadow that's smaller than itself?
Smaller itself, exactly, yeah.
Like, just go shine a light on something and you're going to see the shadow is, depending on the distance.
Right,
yeah. Depending on the distance the object is from whatever it's casting a shadow on, it's either going to be the same size or bigger. And so we have a 70-mile across dot going the wrong way across the United States.
Yes.
Like, it was like, totally the wrong way. And actually, I just I froze the video of the Four Seasons, and even in the spot that I just froze it in is a half moon. The Terminator line is wrong, even on Stellarium. Like, so if you're able to see this on the video, people are watching on YouTube.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah. So if this is the light source shining on that, the Terminator line should be this way. It should be perfectly horizontal, but it's not. It's like 45-degree angle. So even Stellarium shows you that it's not receiving light the way we are told it does as a reflector.
Right.
Even in Stellarium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the only way that it works is for it to be self-illuminating, and as Enoch describes it here, it changes by 1/7 portion, going from being completely void of light, which is the lunar conjunctive, then to being full of light, and then waning again, becoming a gibbous moon, and then having its light disappear in 1/7 portion.
Yeah. Man, this is crazy. I'm just looking at this thing, it boggles my mind, because the light source should be way out here going this way, but it's not. It's not. So, you told me this before, and you probably mentioned it on our shows before. But you're a sighted moon guy too, right? As far as the beginning of the month.
Mm-hmm, right. Yeah, the waxing crescent. Like tonight is the lunar conjunctive moon, and it's the fourth Sabbath of the lunar month, and then tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh for the month of Iyar, should be. And people should be able to see the waxing crescent in the western skies, right after the sunset.
Okay. Yeah. I was a conjunction guy for a long time, and then we had this guy come and speak at our home Bible fellowship, and this was like his thing. Everybody's got their thing, right?
Right.
And his thing was trying to figure out the calendar and the moon and stuff like that for like 30 years. This was like this guy's thing. And, I was the yeah, but guy, because at that time I firmly believed the conjunction. And I yabbeted that guy for like 3 hours, and he had an answer, a biblical answer at that for every one of my yabbats. And finally, he strong-armed me to the point where I was like, okay, uncle, I give, okay, I just switched over, makes a whole lot more sense now.
Yes. And in actually the next portion very soon that we read, Enoch, he'll go into how the waxing crescent is the beginning of the month. So, okay.
We got probably a few minutes here. Let me see what the time is. Yeah, we got 10 minutes. All right. So let me do the next chapter in the Lawrence translation. Chapter 74 in the Lawrence. And I saw another course, a law for her, and how according to that law she performs her monthly revolution. And all these Uriel, the holy angel, who is the leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions. And I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me, and I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their light.
I think that's the Charles, just so you know.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think you're reading the Charles.
Joe. Yep. Okay, this is Lawrence. Okay.
73, I think.
Yeah, I gotta find. I gotta get back on find the index page. I'm going through all the chapters here and trying to find.
Yeah, no worries.
Lawrence. Sorry about that, guys.
You're all good.
Shoot. I can't find it. All of a sudden.
You want me to read first?
Yeah.
Okay. 74. RH, Charles. And I saw another course of law for her, and how, according to that law, she performs her monthly revolution. And all these Uriel, the holy angel, who is the leader of them all, showed to me and their positions. And I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me. And I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their lights, till 15 days were accomplished. In single seventh parts she accomplishes all her light in the east, and in single seventh parts accomplishes all her darkness in the west. And in certain months she alters her setting, and in certain months she pursues her own peculiar course. In 2 months the moon sets with the sun. In those 2 middle portals, the third and the fourth, she goes forth for 7 days and turns about, and returns again through the portal, where the sun rises, and accomplishes all her light. And she recedes from the sun, and in 8 days enters the 6th portal from which the sun goes forth. And when the sun goes forth from the 4th portal, she goes forth 7 days until she goes for the 5th, and turns back again in 7 days into the 4th portal, and accomplishes all her light. And she recedes and enters into the 1st portal in 8 days, and she returns again in 7 days into the 4th portal from which the sun goes forth. Thus I saw their position, how the moons rose and the sun set in those days. And if 5 years are added together, the sun has an overplus of 30 days, and all the days which accrue to it for one of those 5 years, when they are full, amount to 364 days. And the overplus of the sun and of the stars amounts to 6 days in 5 years. 6 days every year come to 30 days. And the moon falls behind the sun and stars to the number of 30 days. And the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity. but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. In 3 years there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years 1,820 days, so that in 8 years there are 2,912 days. For the moon alone, the days amount in 3 years to 1,062 days, and in 5 years she falls 50 days behind, i.e., to the sum of 1,770. There is 5 to be added, 1,062 days, and in 5 years there are 1,770 days, so that for the moon the days 6 and 8 years amount to 21,832 days. For in 8 years she falls behind to the amount of 80 days. All the 70 days she falls behind in 8 years are 80, and the year is accurately completed in conformity with their world stations and the stations of the sun, which rise from the portals through which the sun rises and sets 30 days.
Wow. Yeah, I found it in the Lawrence. I don't have time to read it before the break, so maybe you can just go ahead and comment on that. There's a lot of numbers and interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah, what it is telling us, and this is why I know that Enoch is describing both a lunar and a solar calendar, because he tells us here how you intercalate them. And what he's describing is the 10 days that the moon falls short is that a lunar year is 354 days. It alternates between 29 and 30 days. And when you have 6 times 29 and then 6 times 30, you get 354 days. And so the way that the lunar calendar works, according to Enoch in the alternating 29 and 30 days, is that a lunar year adds up to the 354 days, and the solar year, because it takes 30 days to move through each of the 6 gates of heaven and then back, which is 12 times 30, 360, and then you have the 4 solstices and equinoxes to have 364 days, and so the solar year is 10 days longer than the lunar year. And all of these divisions that he's speaking about, well, he tells you first the 364-day year minus the vernal equinoxes and the solstices, which is why it says that the sun and the stars are 6 days in advance. And so that's correct as long as you subtract the equinoxes and the solstices. And when we actually come back from break, I'll read what I wrote in my book that describes all these numbers to help people explain it. But he's basically telling you how to calculate and intercalate the 2 calendars together and why, what these numbers actually mean, which is just showing us that the moon, the lunar calendar is 10 days short of the 364 days. And this is why every 3rd year or so, depending on the metatonic cycle, you add a 13th month, because you have 30 days where the moon is lagging from the sun. And so every 3rd year or so, you just add another month, the 13th month, which is Adar 2, and then you have the 2 calendars back in sync together.
I've really struggled with that 13th month thing because there's a number of scriptures that would seem to indicate they're, like trees and stuff, talking about, I don't remember the whole argument, articulately enough to describe it here, but remember looking at a bunch of stuff that would seem to refute the 13th month thing, but you're saying that's the only way it works with the Enoch.
Right. Yeah, that's the only way you can intercalate the months. Yeah. Because again, you have to have the barley in, as far as it has to be ripe in order for you to have the first fruits, the celebration of first fruits, where the high priest waves the barley for the sins of Israel, and then to begin the new crop, where they offer the new crop to the Most High first, and to the Levite priests, and then they actually begin to eat the new crop. And so, unless it's in season, you can't have Passover and the celebration of Passover, especially the feast of, first fruits.
That's interesting.
And so that's why you have to add a 13th month every once in a while.
I'm going to have to look into it more. It's one of those things that I kept putting off.
Well, you got so much to do, brother. I mean,
somebody sent me, I'm trying to think if it was a text message. Maybe I'll try to see if I can find it during the break. Did you get a message or an email from somebody that saw something in the Book of Jubilees that specifically tells us why the calendar is going to be jacked up because of disobedience?
Yeah, it's chapter 6. Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Did you get that email recently, or did you?
No, but I have that in my book. No,
So
I didn't get that, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it during the break. Otherwise, it'd be interesting.
It's most of chapter 6.
Most of chapter 6?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go to break. We'll talk about that when we come back.
All right.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
And right before the break, we were talking about something in the Book of Jubilees, I believe chapter 6, that talks about due to disobedience, the calendar was going to be jacked up. And man, I was desperately searching. I get so much stuff, man, sent to me all the time that stuff just gets buried. But what was interesting to me was this guy, man, I wish I could find it. His revelation was whatever the math came out to, it was 2,730 years, which just so happens to perfectly fit the punishment. Leviticus, was it 18 or 26? I think it's 26. Talks about if you, if God chastises you and you don't learn your lesson, you get 7 times the judgment. And when you realize it was Ezekiel chapter 4, I believe, it talks about the northern kingdom's judgment.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be 390, I think it was 390 years. And they didn't repent, so they got 7 times the judgment, and comes out to 2,730 years. So, I've been talking about that in reference to the Ephraim awakening, but this guy sent me an email. It was either an email or text. I don't remember. But he had something to do with that chapter in Jubilees, so maybe you can read it. And the judgment, and however he did the math out, it came up to 2,730. So he's like, could that be why, everybody's starting to try to figure out the calendar and everything? I don't know. What's your take on
it? That is interesting. I did not get what you were talking about with this particular individual, but whoever he is, but please do send that to me too, because I would be interested in checking it out.
If you happen to be listening out there, please send it again, because I got a bazillion text messages and about 1 billion emails, and stuff just gets buried. So
right,
I remember looking at it and go, "Oh, that's cool," but it's been buried.
Yeah, I have that problem as well, but I do believe that this particular passage is speaking about how the calendar will get changed and how the Sabbaths will become confused, as well as that, the children of Israel will start to do blood sacrifice and worship idols. And so let me find exactly where to start, because it's a long one. But so do you want me to read this? Because I think it begins like halfway through, like the 14th.
Yeah, sure. Whatever you think.
Okay, I'll just start from verse 14. And for this law there is no limit of days, for it is forever. They shall observe it. Oh, actually, I should start one up, because I think it mentions the calendar. And this testimony is written concerning you, that you should observe it continually, so that you should not eat on any day any blood of beasts or birds or cattle during all the days of the earth. And the man who eats the blood of beasts or cattle or birds during all the days of the earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. And do thou command the children of Israel to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be before the Lord our God continually. And for this law there is no limit of days, for it is forever. They shall observe it through their generations, so that they may continue supplicating on your behalf with throughout their generations, so that they may messed up. Supplicating on your behalf with blood before the altar every day, and at the time of morning and evening they shall seek forgiveness on your behalf perpetually before the Lord, that they may keep it and not be rooted out. And he gave to Noah and his sons a sign, that there should not again be a flood on the earth. He set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should be not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year to renew the covenant every year. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the days of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they eat blood. But Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it up to thy days. And in thy days the children of Israel forgot it until ye celebrated anew on this mountain. And do thou command the children of Israel to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them. 1 day in the year in this month they shall celebrate the festival. For it is the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits. This feast is twofold and of a double nature according to what is written and engraven concerning it. Celebrate it. For I have written in the book of the first law, in the which I have written for thee, that thou shouldst celebrate it in its season 1 day in the year. And I explain to thee its sacrifices, that the children of Israel should remember and should celebrate it throughout their generations in this month 1 day in every year. And on the new moon of the first month, and on the new moon of the fourth month, and on the new moon of the seventh month, and on the new moon of the 10th month are the days of remembrance, and the days of the seasons in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new moon of the first month he was bidden to make for himself an ark. And on that day the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new moon of the fourth month the mouths of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the new moon of the seventh month all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were open, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. And on this account he ordained them for himself as feasts for a memorial forever. And thus they are ordained. And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks, and from one to another passed their memorial, from the first to the second, and from the second to the third, and from the third to the fourth. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets. And there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year, or from year to year. And the command thou children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from their order, and they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising. For the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the divisions of the days is ordained, lest they forget the feast of the covenant, and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons, and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. For this reason the years will come upon them, when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day, the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. And for this reason I command and testify to thee, that thou mayest testify to them. For after thy death, thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and the seasons and Sabbaths and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh.
Yeah, that was. I wish I could. I was trying to get the math part in what you're saying, but it is interesting though, because he was saying, we know that the sun and moon and stars are there for times and for seasons,
right?
And he's saying, because it's like, why did Judah have to go to the Babylonian captivity? Well, because they didn't honor the land Sabbath, like for like every 7 years you're supposed to let the land itself rest,
right?
And they didn't. So he said, for all the time you didn't do that, I'm booting you out of the land so the land can recuperate. So, they were booted out for 70 years and then got to go back. Whenever he gives a judgment, it has massive implications, not just for the person being judged, but like apparently for all of creation. So in what you're talking about, there's like, the moon's not even going to do what it's supposed to do anymore.
Right.
In the sun. And it was because of their disobedience. So, in a one sense, it kind of releases the pressure to figure out the calendar deal, because like he screwed it up on purpose because of what we did. Not we, you and I, but like Israel.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and I've been saying it anyway. Regardless of that, is that for 2,730 years, the northern kingdom that became the Gentiles, read the Book of Hosea. They were dispersed into all the world. We've been off of God's page, and so to think we're all going to just get it right, in the last, the real kind of, I kind of pegged the beginning of the Ephraim awakening to about 2009, 2010 that time frame. Now, there's always been a remnant. There's always been people out there that have maintained the way of the apostles all along, but there was clearly something happened in the 2009, 2010 timeframe. And when we did the math out from the 720 or 721 BC, 2,730 years later, well, it takes you to the 2009, 2010 timeframe. So, when you just look at, I've got on my virtual house church website, one of those sort of like, it's kind of like a friend finder thing, where you have like all the little markers for people to log in that are keeping Torah. And in this case, and there's like just blue dots everywhere, like all over the United States and all over the world, like just the sea of blue dots of people sort of registering that, yep, we're part of this thing. And, that explosion of people just out of the blue with no leader, no organization, nothing, just people all over the world waking up one day and realizing their Bible doesn't start in Matthew. Galatians is not the only book in the Bible. Hey, let's start in Genesis. What do you know? We probably should still be doing this stuff.
Yes.
People starting to keep the Sabbath, and looking into the feasts and stuff like that. All that really kicked off in about the 2009, 2010 timeframe. And so, we've only had, if we say 2010, we've only had 10 years to try to undo 2,730 years of being messed up.
Yes.
No, we're not going to get it all figured out. All the more so if he actually intentionally made the sun and moon do things differently so that we couldn't get it right. It's almost like, because God gives warnings. He said, listen, you're doing it wrong. Come back to me. Stop whoring after these other gods. And finally he says, okay, fine. You know what? You want them more than me? Have at it. Go for it. I'm gonna boot you out into the other Elohim worlds. The realms that the if you want to use Heiser's divine council idea, the other principalities and powers are running. Go for it. Go with them. And guess what? I'm not even going to allow you to get back on my page because you don't want to learn my ways. So, do you think then that the sun and moon and stars are going to change their course back to perhaps what it was before that?
Well, I actually think that everything is still, even though, we have a 365 day, whatever quarter, if that's actually correct, but that, there used to be this 364 day year. But I actually think that it will be a sign at the end when the stars and the moon do not maintain their course in heaven. And
Oh.
that will be one of the signs for us as to the end of days. But with regard to the calendar, yeah, it is. If it is true that, we have this 365-day quarter, 365 and a quarter day year, which I think somebody should actually, monitor that and check it out and see for certainty, because they lie about everything else. But I do believe that even with this passage here in Jubilees, where it mentions how all the months begin on the new moons. And then you have the 364-day year, and then it talks about the 10 days where the moon, is different from the lunar calendar, is different from the solar calendar. And that intercalation is spoken of in the Perk D. Rabbi Eliezer. And I shared that with you one time before. Um, I'll just read a small portion of it, and then I'll explain what we were talking about in the Book of Enoch. It says here in the Perk D. Rabbi Eliezer, on the 28th of Elul, the sun and the moon were created. The number of years, months, day, night, terms, seasons, cycles, and intercalation were before the Holy One. Blessed be he. And he intercalated the years, and afterwards he delivered the calculations to the first man in the Garden of Eden. As it is said, this is the calculation for the generations of Adam. The calculation of the world is therein for the generations of the children of Adam. Adam handed on the tradition to Enoch, who was initiated in the principle of intercalation, and he intercalated the year, as it is said, and Enoch walked with God. Enoch walked in the ways of the calculation concerning the world which God had delivered to Adam. And Enoch delivered the principle of intercalation to Noah, and he was initiated in the principle of intercalation, and he intercalated the years. And it goes on to, all the different patriarchs up to Abraham and on and on. But I'm going to go ahead and go to, because I know we'll quickly run out of time, that what Enoch is describing here in these particular portions with all these numbers is how the intercalation works. And so I'll read the explanation. The moon's monthly cycle, 29.531 days, is shorter than that of the sun's by 30 days, as it cycles through the 6 gates of the heaven, making the lunar year 12 months of alternating between 29 and 30-day periods, which add up to a total of 6 times 29 and 6 times 30, which is 354 days. And since it takes the sun 30 days each to course back and forth through the 6 gates of heaven, the 12 months of the solar cycle add up to 12 times 30, 360 days. Subtracting the 360 days, which correlates to the sun's motion through these gates, from the 354 days, which correspond to the moon's motion through these gates, equals the 6 days a year, or 30 days over 5 years, that Enoch cites as belonging only to the sun and stars, which again in 73:13 he says, the moon brings on all the years exactly, that their stations may come neither too forwards nor too backwards a single day, but that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. In 3 years, the days are 1,092. In 5 years, they are 1,820. In 8 years, 2,912 days. If one divides the totals given for the amount of days that correspond to the length of these years, the math in every instance equals 364, which is the total number of days in a solar year according to Enoch's count. So 3 years is 1,092 days divided by 3, which is 364 days. 5 years, 1,820 days divided by 5 equals 364 days. 8 years, 2,912 days, which divided by 8 equaled 364 days. And so Enoch is speaking here about the difference between the solar year, according to the descriptions of the motions of the sun, and the lunar year will correspond to God's calendar as determined by the synodic month and the 4 phases of the moon. Enoch 73:14. To the moon alone belong in 3 years 1,062 days. In 5 years it has 50 days less than the sun, for an additional being made to 1,062 days. In 5 years there are 1,770 days, and the days of the moon in 8 years are 2,832 days. If one divides the total given for number of days by the length of the years, in every instance the sum equals 354. When one divides 354 by 12 as the number of lunar months on God's calendar, one gets 29.5, which coincides approximately with the 29.530588 days of a synodic month. The ancient Hebrew calendar system maintains alignment with this average by alternating the 12 lunar months by 29 and 30 days. And so 1,062 divided by 3 is 354 days. 1,770 divided by 5 is 354 days. 2,832 divided by 6 equals 354 days. 364 as total number for the days of the solar year minus the 354 as a total number of the days of the lunar year equals the 10 days, which multiplied by 5 equal the 50 days and 5 years that differentiate the lunar and the solar year according to Enoch's description. In Enoch 73:15, for its days in 8 years are less than those of the sun by 80 days, which 80 days are its diminution in 8 years. If one subtracts the number of days in a solar year, 364, from the number of days in a corresponding lunar year, 354, one will find that the lunar year has exactly 10 fewer days than the solar year. In 8 years, that diminution totals 80 days. The year then becomes truly complete according to the station of the moon and the station of the sun, which rises in the different gates, which rise and set in them for 30 days. These are the leaders of the chiefs of the thousands, those which preside over all creation and over all the stars, with the 4 days which are added and never separated from the place allotted them according to the complete calculation of the year. And these serve 4 days which are not calculated in the calculation of the year. It takes the sun 30 days to move back and forth through the 6 gates of heaven, which are spread from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn. 6 multiplied by 30 equals 180. Multiply 2 for each of the 6-month periods that takes the sun to travel from tropic to tropic equals 360 days. The 4 days which are added and never separated from the place allotted them represent the 4 additional days that it takes the sun to either cross the equator when reaching the 2 equinoxes, or having reached culmination at either of the 2 solstices, to reverse course and begin moving in the opposing direction. Adding these 4 days to the 360, which define its travel back and forth through the gates of heaven, totals the 360 plus 4 days, equaling the 364 days. And so, again, these days, the 364-day and the 354-day lunar calendar are the 2 calendars that Enoch is describing. And it's important to understand how these 2 work together because, as it says in the Targum, and the Lord said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heaven to distinguish between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for festival times, and for the numbering by them the account of days, and for the sanctifying of the beginning of the months and the beginning of the years, the passing away of months and the passing away of years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of the season. And as we saw in the Book of Jubilees, where it's talking about the, how the months, the new moon, actually begin the days in the first, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th, I believe, is what was mentioned, and it describes that on these particular days did these particular events happen according to the Jubilees, and then it describes how this knowledge becoming lost, the new moons and the festivals and the feast days, everything would get screwed up. And so my opinion, what happened is that they took off of the lunar solar calendar and the way that they intercalate with the, again, Enoch describing 354 days, which the lunar calendar is 10 days short, and so every third year, according to the metatonic cycle, you just add this 13th month of Dar 2. But since we've been on a solar calendar and the Sabbaths are every 7 days and nothing is, the months are no longer determined by the new moon, the waxing crescent and the beginning of it, as it describes here in this particular book, that each one of the months mentioned begins with the new moon. And so you have to understand the way that the 354-day lunar calendar comes together with the 364-day solar calendar, and then the additional 30 days every third year or so, which you add, depending on the barley, the 13th month, the Adar 2. And then that puts the barley festival back in line with Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And if you understand the way these two cycles work, in my opinion, then you can truly determine what are the beginnings of the months, also the seasons according to the sun, but the feast days, which in my opinion, the 15th, the unleavened bread, and the Feast of Sukkot in Tishri, the month of Tishri, the 7th month, those are always in line with the full moon. And the only way you can have that calendar be correctly in alignment and those feast days determined by that is by following the Enochian lunar solar calendar as we've laid it out. And as I sent you, and if people check that out, like as I said, tonight is the lunar conjunctive Sabbath. Tomorrow is the Kadesh for the month of Iyar.
All right, hold that thought. We'll come back for the final segment.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Everyday questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
We're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, for the final half-hour segment of the broadcast. Wow, this is just flying by, as usual. Joined with Zen Garcia, and then the previous segment. Wow, Zen, you were covering a lot of territory. Were you reading? What were you reading from? Was that one of your books that you were reading from earlier?
Yes, it is the Flat Earth Has Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. Because in that book, I go through all of the 14 chapters of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries and break down every chapter and every verse. So I have all of those verses listed from the Book of Enoch, and then my explanation of what they actually mean, in my opinion, according to, what I learned of this particular calendar and how they work together, the sun and the moon, to determine. And also, it describes the planets and the constellations as part of this, the greater calendar that is encoded into the skies, into the heavens.
It really is extraordinary. I think it. I think it sounds a lot more complicated, probably, than it really is.
I agree.
I mean, reading through this and even listening to you read on that, at some point my eyes start to glaze over, and I'm going, okay, I got to see it. Like, it's got to be like, I need a picture.
Yes.
Somebody help me out here. Give me a picture. It's like a picture's worth 1,000 words. Somebody give me a picture.
Right, and there are many pictures in the book to kind of help people to get a visual grasp. Because I know a lot of people like yourself need that, to see that, to get better understanding on the greater context of what's being revealed. And so, yeah, I do. And I think what you brought up on Stellarium, it shows the same thing, the way that the moon falls behind the sun 50 minutes every day. And that's what creates its 1/7 portion of light, the differentiation between the days, and how it will cycle from where it's moving with the sun in lunar conjunctive phase as it is tonight, and which means you can't see it because it's with the sun. And then once it that 50 minutes tomorrow of where it's lagging behind, we'll actually see the waxing crescent, which will establish the Kadesh for the beginning of the next calendar month.
So how much have you looked into that's kind of a stupid question for me to even ask you, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what do you think they were, the Qumran community, people talk about the Zadok calendar. Do you think they was a Zadok Enoch calendar, or were the Zadoks keeping the Enoch calendar, or what do you think was going on in the Qumran community?
Well, they were keeping a portion of the Enochian calendar. Here's the thing that people fail to understand. The real Enoch calendar follows both the sun, the 364-day solar year, and the moon, the 354-day lunar year, and it also follows the revolutions of the planets and the revelations of the constellation, which I told you the greater year is that 25,920 year cycle that it takes the sun to move through the 12 houses of the zodiac. That's the greater year. But it tracks and monitors that as well. Because again, that's the way that it is encoded into the heavens, that Enoch describes the motions of all the luminaries. And so what the priestly calendar in the Qumran and the Zadok calendar was specific to was the 364-day solar calendar. However, that determination, that's not the calendar that they followed to determine the Levitical feast days. That's just a calendar they followed to determine what priest and what priest would serve in that month of what was the division of the solar year. And they determined, um, because you'll see a lot of times how they tried to keep track of the way that the solar calendar aligned with the lunar calendar. And the way that they were trying to do that was because they were trying to stay true to what it says in Jubilees chapter 6, that all of the months begin with the new moon and the sighting of the new moon, which is the waxing crescent. And then the Sabbaths following the new moon are determined by the quarterly phases of the moon. And so you have the first quarter being the first Sabbath, the full moon being the second Sabbath, the third quarter moon being the third Sabbath, and the lunar conjunctive moon being the fourth Sabbath. And then it changes um, every month is determined by the new moon. And then again, when you have these 30 days in 3 years where the moon falls short because of the 354-day lunar calendar, you have to add the 13th month of Adar, which is really simple. All you do is add a 13th month when the barley's not ripe, and then it situates the two calendars back together again. But the people that are studying the Dead Sea Scrolls and that are believing, that the Jews are the Essenes and that they were actually following the 364-day solar calendar, well, yes, they were for determining who would serve as the priests for the Levitical bloodline, because they had 12 different priests that served according to which month of the year it was. But that's, again, not how they determine the feast days. The feast days and the months are determined, and also the weeks, they're determined by the moon. The new moon is always, and Enoch tells us, when we get to that portion of the scripture, it tells us that the waxing crescent, when the moon first becomes visible, that is the beginning of the months. And just as it says again in Jubilees, that all of the months that Noah did all of these things, and that the events of the deluge happened, they occurred on the new moon of the beginning of those months. And so they show you that it is the new moon which determines the beginnings of those months. Even though, yes, it is mentioned the 364-day solar year, but there's also the 354-day lunar year mentioned, and you have to understand how those two work together. Otherwise, that's where the confusion occurs, because the people that want to follow a 364-day solar year where, the vernal equinox is the beginning of the year, and then they have Sabbath every 7 days, that's not according to what is the phases of the moon, because again, in my opinion, the phases of the moon is what establishes the beginning of the month and also the quarterly phases. And I sent you a passage from the Legends of the Jews where this is also affirmed. It says, along with the first, they received the calendar in use among the Jews, for the Passover feast is to be celebrated on the 15th day of the month of Nisan, and with this month the year is to begin. But the computations for the calendar are so involved that Moses could not understand them until God showed him the movements of the moon plainly. And then you skip a little bit and it tells you that also the determination of the new moon was the subject of special divine teaching. And then it tells us that Michael and Gabriel as witnesses, he addressed searching questions to the angels as to how the new moon had seemed to them. Then the Lord addressed Moses and Aaron, saying, "Thus shall my children proclaim the new moon on the testimony of 2 witnesses and through the president of the court." And so it was established in ancient Israel that by 2 witnesses they would watch for the appearance of the waxing crescent. And then the shofars would be blown, and then the new moon festival was celebrated at the temple, and everybody would run there for what was called the new moon convocation. And that was the day that no man knoweth, the hour of the day. And so the reason they didn't know is because everybody was in limbo as to when the waxing crescent was going to make its appearance. And then when it did, that was the beginning of the new moon and what was called Kadesh, the new moon day, the time of the new moon.
You mentioned something, and I just want to bring it up because we only got 15 minutes left of the show, and I wanted to get your take on it real quick.
Yeah.
You were mentioning the sun going through the various houses of the so-called zodiac or the Mazzaroth, and that taking 25,000 plus years. Yes. Now, that supposedly is what like the Mayan Aztec calendar stone and all that was supposed to, address things like that. Now, of course, biblically speaking, whether we're talking about the Masoretic text with a 4,000 years to Yeshua, with us being about 6,000 years, or we go with the Septuagint where we're at about 7,000 years right now. What is your take with if he did in fact set it up for a 25,000 year cycle, then, and we've said it before, that if we're going to get a reset, it's not unreasonable to believe that we're in a reset. Do you think that whole system is meant to continue from the day of creation, starting with Adam, or is it because the sun, moon, and stars didn't show up until day 4? So that would lead me to believe that if there's some sort of 25,000 year cycle of any kind, that it would start with Genesis forward, Genesis day 4 forward, not be indicative or reflective of anything from a prior, before the reset that we're in now.
Right.
So then would it be your understanding or take or opinion that, because we don't get much after the millennial reign of Christ in the book of Revelation, we get, tribulation, New Jerusalem, millennial reign, Satan's out for a little bit, judged, and then what? Big question mark.
Right.
Do you think that question mark will encompass whatever he's trying to say in the Bible and the stars, so to speak, for 25,000 years, or have you given much thought of that at all?
Well, I think that God established this greater cycle for some reason. And it does say that after the millennial reign and during the millennial reign, in Isaiah chapter 66, that we will celebrate from Kadesh to Kadesh and then Sabbath to Sabbath, which in my opinion, again, is linking the new moon and the Rosh Kadesh with the determination of Sabbath. And so there seems to be some ongoing celebration and honoring, and I would think that it would be a continuation of the way that God had established the calendar. Again, I would be interested to see if we really are on a 365 day and a quarter year, or if it's still 364 days. Somebody smarter than me would have to figure that out, but I'm interested in finding that out. But I do believe that without a doubt we are still going to honor the movements of the but again, and nobody knows for certain, but I do believe that because there is the mention of Kadesh to Kadesh and Sabbath to Sabbath, that there has to be a moon, and maybe it's a reset of the same calendar system that God has established into the heavens with the zodiac, the Mazzaroth. But who really knows? I mean, that's up to God. He could totally change it out and
or speed it up real quick.
Yeah, and right now it tells the story of the coming of the Messiah. The fight between the two bloodlines, the Gemini twins, and how it would be resolved that the Christ.
Oh, wow, I never thought about that.
It tells the story of the two bloodlines, the war between the bloodlines, and how the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. And so that's the story of the Mazzaroth. And we know that Christ, born of the Virgin, that he would be that seed of the woman as prophesied in Genesis 3:15, and that it would be him that crushes the head of the serpent, which this was fulfilled on the day that he was crucified, because some 1600 years earlier or however long, uh, David had killed Goliath and buried his skull there in Golgotha, which means Goliath of Gath, Calvary, the hill of the skull. And so when he was crucified, he was actually crushing the head of the serpent, the seed of the serpent, as it was nipping at his heel. And so this prophecy found in Genesis 3:15 was fulfilled on the day of the crucifixion. And so, but again, the Mazzaroth tells the story of this entire bloodline war, in my opinion, and the same thing, the prophecy of Genesis 3:15. And so,
are you aware of whether or not Joseph Seiss or Bullinger addressed Gemini that way?
No, I don't believe so. But I don't know for certain. It would be interesting because, the more and more I do look back at ancient, it has to be more ancient scholars because this was common knowledge back then. But it has since in modern times and with translation of the scriptures from the Aramaic into the Greek and then into the English and the Latin and all that. That all of this knowledge has become lost, but it's still encoded there. I mean, you see, once you understand, without a doubt. I mean, Christ even saying that, the murderers of the prophets were from Abel to Zacharias. He's linking them, the Pharisees that are conspiring his murder, with the murder of Abel, who was Cain. And so, without a doubt, the tares are the children of the enemy. The enemy is the devil, the wicked one. I mean, all of that is there encoded into scripture. And once you understand it and you unlock it that way, it makes sense as to why even the patriarchs and the prophets kept such a detailed listing of the genealogies of Christ and of the other people that were born all through the generations. And you see, I've spoken about, there's genealogy lists for Mary in the Book of the Bee and the Cave of the Treasures. And like the Book of Luke, Cain is excluded from those bloodlines and those genealogies, as are his children. And so, there's a reason for all of that. And when people, open themselves to the possibility of the things that I'm saying, then all of these things really start to make sense in a deeper and more profound way, in my opinion.
Well, I'm beginning to share your opinion on that. It's got me curious now to go look into Gospel of the Stars, Joseph Seiss, The Witness of the Stars, and E.W. Bullinger, just to see because they do a pretty solid breakdown of each of the constellations, what they represent in the gospel message in the sky. I posted some things recently on my Facebook page about, Enoch. Adam didn't have a Bible. Enoch didn't have a Bible. Methuselah didn't have a Bible. All these guys didn't have a Bible, yet somehow they got by. Exactly, and in fact, they got by even better than everybody that does have a Bible. I mean, you look at the relationships that these guys had with the author. But somebody said, well, they did have a Bible. It was written in the stars. And I was like, touche. You got me on that one, because that's true. That they didn't have a Bible in the sense like we do.
Right.
But they did have a unique and solid understanding of the gospel in the stars, and that it was laid out. And it is so fascinating that cultures from all over the world are calling certain constellations the same thing, in their language.
Right.
And frankly, other than Orion's about the only one that actually looks like, to me, the description. Yeah. I mean, you see the belt, and you kind of see the shoulder, and like the club. You kind of like, oh yeah, I can see a dude up there. It's like when people stare at the clouds and they see animals or whatever. What the ancients saw, and they see a lot more. They saw a lot more stars than we do.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
With all the pollution and light pollution and everything else that we have to deal with, we see a fraction of the night sky that they would have seen. And yet, with all those zillions of stars, they look up there and they're like, oh yeah, that's a lion and that's a virgin and that's twins over there. And I'm like, how did you get that unless God told you that?
Exactly.
And so it had to have been a shared knowledge.
Right.
It was passed down from the time of Abraham, or going back to Adam.
Yes.
Yeah, Adam and certainly Enoch.
Right.
For the whole world to have, there's some variance, but for the most part, they're pointing to the same location in the sky and saying essentially the same thing as far as what it represents. So
yes, absolutely.
For the audience that's not aware of that, those two books are fascinating books. It's The Gospel in the Stars by Joseph Seiss and Witness of the Stars by E.W. Bullinger, both of which I believe were written in the late 1800s, if memory serves. There's another book that I've only recently begun to kind of skim through. It's more recent, called Wheel of the Stars by Andrew Gabriel Roth. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I actually have that book. The only thing, is he is global. And so it makes it difficult for me to read stuff like that just because.
That's interesting too, because we know Bullinger. Well, he was a card-carrying, hardcore flat earther.
Right, right.
I don't know what Seiss's worldview was. I'm not aware of anything. It's one of those things you have to go back and reread it and see what his take was. It would be fascinating to if he was also.
Oh yeah.
Of the mindset, because I believe both books came out pretty close to each other.
Right.
In time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always interesting to me to go back and to see other people that were led to the revelation of truth and that stood by it and that wrote about it and shared information on it. And I do enjoy reading a lot of what they have to say, but I do find it difficult for me to now read anybody that supports a heliocentric point of view, and they're talking about all these wonders in the heavens and stars, and it's completely fabricated, like the cosmology that they believe in. And so knowing different and better, it's difficult for me to read what I know is not in alignment with truth. But there's still a lot of good information out there. And we were once lost as well. So.
Well, yeah, totally. When I look back, now, even just a few years ago, I'm like, what in the world? How did I ever, because I always, Facebook tells you, hey, this time, a few years ago, whatever, you posted this on the same day. And it's funny because it's always reminding me, what I was doing like 5 years ago when I was first getting into all this stuff, and just rethinking the stuff, the whole concept of light years, and
right,
like the North Star is supposedly something like 325 light years away. I'm like, okay, that's 325 times 6 trillion. So the idea that we even could see the North Star is absurd. Right. But when you start looking at because I posted some videos, there's some really creative videos that, as an artist, I'm going, oh, yeah, that's really good. CG and everything, it's really, well done. But, you see these videos, talking about scale and order of magnitude and whatnot, and this guy did a really creative job of showing like down to the Planck scale, going up to the quark and into the atomic scale and then all the way up to the web of universes, and just showing all the scales. But when you get to like the scale of the planets to the Earth, and then the sun to the Earth, and then like Betelgeuse and Arcturus, and the order of magnitude, how much bigger like Arcturus is than our own sun, and how much bigger still Betelgeuse and some of these other ones are. And you're like, okay, wait a minute, man. Isaiah, Yeshua himself, the creator of all of this, and John, said that all the stars are falling here.
Yes.
So not only do you have a massive problem, pardon the pun, with the size of these things coming here, but the distances. I'm like,
right.
Forget about the 7-year tribulation. It's going to take 325 years for the North Star to get here, traveling at 186,282 miles per second.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Never mind how long it's going to take for Andromeda to get here and how all that stuff's going to fit on the Earth. You just have to say, okay, one is completely absurd and has to be thrown out. Which one's it going to be? Well, if you claim to be a Bible-believing Christian, I'm sorry, I am not calling Isaiah, Yeshua, the creator of the cosmos himself, and John, the liars.
Right.
It's going to be the people that are telling me, yeah, Arcturus is this big and North Star is 325 light years away.
Right. And the Book of Enoch tells us that the sun and the moon are of the same size and dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that say?
You know, we got 2 minutes left on the broadcast, but I wanted to kind of address that real quick. Maybe we can talk about it later as we continue through these chapters. But you know, they are stated to be the same size, and yet you have with I just forgot the name of it, but it's a certain type of solar eclipse where the moon is smaller. Like usually the moon perfectly fits over the disk of the sun. Mm-hmm. But there are times in the big tetrads everybody was talking about a few years ago, there's a repeat of that coming up about 10 years or so.
Right.
And one of those is going to have that solar eclipse where the moon is smaller than the orb of the disk of the sun. And so it looks like a ring in the sky. How would that happen if they're the same size?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think that some of this can be explained with what Enoch describes as the lesser moon and Rahu and Ketu and some of that other stuff in the Vedic cosmology. And there are things in this not solar system, but universe, right. That are not explainable, and biblical cosmology that we're still learning about. But certainly they are described in the ancient sources and the ancient accounts.
Yeah. These days I have far more questions than I have answers. So
right.
I always enjoy doing shows like this. We're out of time. Hey, Zen, thanks so much.
It was a good time, brother.
Yeah, we'll pick up where we left off next week on your channel on TFR, which is Thursday. At
9 to 11 Eastern.
9 Eastern. Yep. 8 Central.
Yep.
All right.
God bless all. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.